Welcome everyone again to our final keynote session here today, day one for the BYU Sports Business Summit. So far, we've had such a great first three sessions, and we're excited here with our wonderful panelists for talking about the world of sports merchandising and lifestyle branding. Just wanted to quickly introduce all of our panelists before we dive into some questions. We have Mackenzie Bauer from Thread Wallets, Steve Lichty from Black Clover, Jessica Klodnicki from Skullcandy, and Brock Huber from StockX. So panelists, thank you so much for joining us. I think this is a topic that a lot of us that are attending are very, very interested in, because we always see the shoes, the apparel, the cool different accessories that athletes or others wear. And so we're really interested and excited to dive into this topic a little bit more. But before we kind of get into some more questions, would love to start off with how each of you got into this side of the industry and why you decided to do this path as opposed to other paths. So we'll start with Mackenzie, and then we'll go from there.
Awesome. Can you guys hear me? Everything good? Okay, perfect. My name is Mackenzie Bauer, and my husband and I started Thread Wallets together back in 2015. I had just somewhat recently graduated from BYU Hawaii. That's where I went to school. And I graduated with a degree in international cultural studies and peace building. So totally unrelated to marketing in a lot of ways. And I'd planned to go to law school, get my master's in conflict resolution. And then I met my husband, who is an entrepreneur through and through. So we started Thread Wallets together, and I just quickly took to the marketing aspect of things. And for a while, I kind of questioned why I was drawn to that. And then I pinpointed it in 2020 with all the turmoil that we saw with a lot of social causes. And it's because marketing is telling stories. It's the narratives that a brand pushes to build a community and to bring people together and to, in my mind, like uplift people and inspire people. And that's exactly what my conflict resolution background was all about too, is creating narratives that brought people together. And so that's kind of how I got into this. It was kind of just learned. I didn't study anything related to marketing, but I'm now the CMO of an 8-figure company, which is just really crazy, and it's a learning experience, but I'm here and I'm loving it.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Steve, tell us your story.
Yeah, I think with most things in life, you don't ever see it coming. Any good laid plans never work out. I had always had the entrepreneurial bug and had done different things, but I had actually taken a much more, what I would say, traditional course, and had been working at Goldman Sachs for many years. And then I had my dad come approach me because he had partnered with a guy that was selling these hats basically out of his trunk. And I thought, oh no, this is really scary. How am I going to convince my wife to leave my nice finance job to go help build an apparel company? Somehow I pulled that off. That was about 6 or so years ago. And since then, the business has just exploded. And it's so fun because I know we'll talk about this more later, but we get to touch so many different people's lives. Never did I expect that we would be traveling to Asia and Europe, and we'd be opening our 3rd store in Dubai, and all these different places that we never even fathomed 6 years ago. It's just fun for me to walk in the office and see all these new designs and what's happening and pallets moving. Again, when I convinced my wife of this 6 years ago, I didn't think that was going to happen, but I fell into it. I'm so grateful. You know, we learn every day, we make mistakes every day, but it's been a very fun process. So that's how I fell into it.
And just for our audience, Steve chose the boldest and loudest hat he could for the panel.
Yeah, he said to dress to show the brand. So I figured, you got to go with red peach is the color that our design team said was in for 2021. And so that's why I'm wearing it. That's what they say. And so we do what they tell us, right?
Well, it looks great.
Thank you.
Jessica, going to you now, tell us how you started in this side of, especially with Skullcandy. I know you've done a lot of different things around the outdoors and athletics. So tell us your side.
Yeah, I interned for the U.S. bobsled team so many years ago. I'm embarrassed to tell you what year, but had an internship where I made $2.17 an hour. And I got a taste of the sports world, which was amazing. And at the same time, I was majoring in advertising and public relations. And when it was time to go get a job, I had this brilliant idea with my 4 months of experience that the Olympics would for sure hire me. So I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and the 96 Olympics were coming. So it gives my age away. They did not hire me. So I had to get a real job. And I spent the first half of my career in more traditional consumer products. So I worked on everything from hair products to baby products and wonderful companies. But my dream was to really connect my personal passions with my profession. And so I spent 10 years trying to get there and eventually was able to make that shift to go work for Mizuno. And I was a marathon runner, triathlete, golfer, and they happened to do all those sports. So I was running marketing for Mizuno for a while. And once you're sort of, I always like to say it's terrible, but like once you get in the industry and you get in the club, it opens a lot of doors. So from there, I was able to stay within the outdoor industry, running Bell helmets, so motorcycle and bike helmets, and then a portfolio of outdoor products like Camelback. And so I've had the good fortune to experience everything from cycling, motorsports, snow sports, outdoor, golf, running, baseball, softball, volleyball, and I've touched all of them in some way, always in a marketing and product development capacity. And I love it. And I ended up at Skullcandy because I fell in love with Park City. And I was actually mountain biking at the top of the Wow Trail in Park City, Utah. And that week I got a call from Skullcandy. And Skullcandy's super interesting because we're not a sports brand, we're a consumer electronics brand. But our DNA and our culture is very much, if you came to our office during normal times, it would feel like a snowboard brand. And so it brought together kind of both of my worlds of a traditional consumer products company with the flavor and the culture of outdoor. And we're very much plugged into the board sports space. So it brought together kind of the first and second half of my career, and it's been amazing.
Well, I love what you said too about connecting your passions with actual work that you can, get paid for and do for a living. So thank you for sharing that, Jessica. Brock, I know you're not based in Utah. I know you're out in California, but tell us how you started and got into this side, especially with how big and great StockX has been doing the past few years.
Yeah. So I guess it all starts at BYU, like most stories do. Sitting in a class with Tom Peterson, who I imagine still teaching there. And he reminded everyone in class the first day that we were not special. He said, you're not special. Nobody cares about you. The only way you're going to get anywhere is if you try harder than everyone else. And anyway, that's mostly true. The other half of it's luck. So I was not that creative. So I went into investment banking and I was working at a couple of investment banks in the Bay Area. And from there, I jumped over to Google and was on their mergers and acquisitions team, working in a lot of Google search, Google Assistant, computer vision, buying startups, that variety. But in my personal life, in my spare time, I've always been kind of a second-rate basketball player and a first-rate sneakerhead. And so anyway, I knew a few people that worked at StockX, and they got to a point in the life cycle of the company where they needed someone to run the corporate development and strategy team. And I'd been doing corporate development at Google. So I came over, and it was the first job interview. It was actually useful to know the difference between Jordan 1s and Jordan 4s and be able to talk about the different trends and how Nike releases their stuff versus Adidas. And so anyway, just hard work, luck, and able to marry up my personal excitement for sneakers and basketball and stuff into my day job. It's been a lot of fun.
I was going to say, Brock, if we had this conference in person, we would have set up like a half court setup so you could go one-on-one with some of the students that are attending.
Yeah, I think there never was any plaques or rafters in the RB dedicated to me. So I could have shown you guys try to recapture my glory days of being not very good.
Maybe someday. Well, thank you so much again for being here and sharing your first stories. I just want to remind everyone that's listening, we will have some time for audience questions at the end. So please put those in the chat, and then we'll pull a few of those to ask our panelists. But kind of going on, a lot of you talked about, and especially Mackenzie and Steve, where you've had a lot, an entrepreneurial background, whether it's helping to found the company, and Jessica and Brock being, part of companies as they continue to grow. In this side, especially with apparel, it just seems like such a creative side of the industry. How has innovation and creativity played a big role with the organization that you're at now? Mackenzie, we'll start with you.
Creativity is I can't even begin to talk about how important creativity is. We have 5 core values at Shred Wallets, and the first one is creativity. We are constantly encouraging our employees to get creative and be creative. We have monthly art days where we get together and create. We've done tie-dye, we've done watercoloring, we've done so many different things. We just had a lot of our team contribute to this big art wall where everyone designed posters, and we've hung them up on the wall, and it looks so beautiful. I think that in today's world, and the landscape of the world in general is getting more competitive. You have a lot of D2C brands coming up. You have there's just so much competition in almost every aspect of life, I feel like right now, with social media on the rise, new platforms like TikTok emerging. Creativity is key if you want to stay ahead of the game and be innovative and stand out and draw attention to what you're trying to build. If you don't have that creative aspect, you just get lost in the crowd. And that's why we really encourage our team to foster that creativity within them. And we encourage autonomy so that our employees feel like they have the ability to use their creativity. And then we love to encourage our ambassadors and what we call our thread heads. There are athletes and the people that we pay to endorse Thread. We are constantly encouraging them to be creative too, whether it's helping them with their outlets from surfing to skating, or one of our artists or one of our ambassadors is an artist on the North Shore of Oahu. So we're just constantly trying to push that creativity because it just helps you stay innovative and stand out amongst the crowd and the competition.
You're definitely right. I mean, as many people have talked in previous sessions, it's especially now with the pandemic, everything's just that much harder and that much more fought over in terms of space, viewership, and all those other things. Steve, tell us how innovation and creativity is played with Black Clover and you starting the brand there.
Yeah, absolutely. For us, I think it comes from diversity of thought. And what I mean by that, if you look at the executive team alone, I came from more of a finance background. Another person was a professional poker player. Another one was a home builder, and one played pro golf. So those are 4 individuals that have nothing to do with each other. And then we've hired a team that's even more diverse than us. The one thing that we've always found is I don't have every great idea. I probably have more bad ideas. And so by adding in all this diversity, we come up with crazy things like this red peach hat I'm wearing that people love, or we try new belts. We do all these different things. And so for us, it's creating that environment where everyone can truly share their thought. And I know that sounds very cliche, but if you ever came to Black Clover and we're in a conference room, I think some people worry there's a fight about to break out because we're all sharing our opinions and talking so fast. But that's what creates that innovation. I can't tell you how many times we all walk into a room to discuss maybe our big virtual marketing meeting that we're going to do in May, and where we thought we were going pivots by the end of that meeting, and everyone's okay with it and everyone's on board, and we go full speed after that idea. So for us, it's just being willing to be wrong. I think number 1 is critical in any creative environment. And 2, to make sure you're getting a very, very diverse workplace. And that's coming from many different backgrounds. If it wasn't for that, we would have the same exact style that the founder started, 11 years ago, and it wouldn't have changed. So for us, that is the key, is a willingness to listen to others and, accept when maybe your idea isn't the best.
I just want to throw in there really quick too, to foster that creativity and that diversity of thought. I would recommend everybody read the book Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull. He's the founder of Pixar, and the whole book is just like a swimming pool of information about how to like foster creativity within your business and within the initiatives that you're taking.
And I was going to say, back to Steve's point, I think that's really hard for a lot of us to do, especially when, most of us are young in our careers, and we don't want to show that we are wrong about things, because sometimes that puts us in a negative light. So thank you for sharing that insight. Jessica and Brock, I know that both of you come with and are with companies that, as opposed to Mackenzie and Steve, that are more entrepreneurial. Theirs have been more startup in recent years, but you guys have been with established brands. How has creativity and innovation helped you as you've come to this organization and to fit into a culture that is already there? Jessica, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Well, we've always had a creative culture, I would say. Skullcandy, in the early days before Beats arrived, we were the first lifestyle audio brand. So we literally brought color, literally and figuratively, to the category. Before Skullcandy, headphones and earbuds were black, white, and silver, and pretty utilitarian. So that DNA has always been with us. But we reset our brand foundation, as I like to call it. And with that, we also have 5 pillars for values, and one of them is fresh tracks. And so we use that to encourage, even though we're not a startup, we behave like one most days, and we very much encourage everybody to constantly be thinking about innovation, regardless of function. I think people think of innovation as product or product design or product development, or creativity is just for the marketing people. Aside from maybe accounting, where they don't like it when you get creative, we very much encourage everybody at every level to bring their ideas to the table. And I think that's super important to establish that environment. And Carson, it was a nice point you made, that if you're new or you're young, like, it has to be a safe environment to do that. But to add to what everybody else has already said, I think the one thread throughout my entire career is just really getting to know the consumer. And that can be either formal consumer insights that I've done, big multi-billion-dollar companies, or it can be really scrappy. And there's so many ways to get after understanding your consumer. And if you understand your consumer and can uncover those important insights, that can really drive innovation. And I'll give one other example. That this was not any formal consumer research. It was just watching what was happening with macro trends. We look at our competitors and we care what they're doing, but we don't want to follow what they're doing, right? No innovation comes out of trying to emulate your competitors. And so we actually, in Brock's space, we were looking more at sneaker culture and streetwear culture rather than consumer electronics. So it inspired, for the last 2 years, some really creative programming where we started doing kind of sneaker drop type limited edition product that we were dropping every month. And so had we done it, old school, and looked at what our competitors were doing and hadn't really expanded the lens, we wouldn't have figured that out. And so I think understanding your consumer intimately, looking at competition differently and who you consider your competition, and then making sure you have an environment, whether you're large or small, that anybody in the organization can contribute to the innovation or creativity pipeline.
Yeah, I agree. And look, Carson, I think you're right. I am not an entrepreneur, but StockX is only 5 years old. StockX is absolutely a startup where, you think about the insanity of it all. We recently disclosed that in 2020, we had $1.8 billion of sales of GMV. And we're 5 years old. Think about all the problems, all the crazy growth, the things we're trying to deal with and fix and figure out as we go. But the big thing about creativity is it doesn't, I feel like a lot of times people think that creativity is like, being some free spirit that has these totally wild ideas. If you think about what StockX is, a question I get all the time: why does StockX exist if there's already eBay, right? And it's the creativity of StockX was, hey, why is it so much harder to buy one pair of Nike shoes relative to buying a share of Nike stock? Why don't we make it as easy to buy the products as it is to buy the securities, like a share of stock? And so then the creativity came, well, what would we need to unlock that? And the answer was, as opposed to being listings based like an eBay, we're a product based listing. You go to StockX, you type in Air Jordan 4 Cause, you're going to get one page for that one sneaker. And that's where all the transactions happen for every size. And on that page, we tell you what the lowest price is someone's willing to sell it for, what the highest price is someone's willing to buy it for, and we show you all the historical transactions. Now, like, that's not like revolutionary, but it was something that no one else was offering. And then the last piece of that puzzle was, how do we get creative and make sure that when someone can simply just show up on our website and say a price and become a seller, how do we make sure that that experience is actually good for the buyer on the other end? And the answer was, well, we need to authenticate that. So then we put together an authentication playbook to figure out how to ingest these sneakers from the seller, take a look at them, confirm they are what they are supposed to be. They're in the condition they're supposed to be in. They're the right size, the right color, they have the right box, whatever, and get that out to the buyer. So, like, when it's all done and you go and visit a web experience or an app experience like StockX, it just makes sense, right? But before that existed, no one had thought of that yet. It was still a super creative idea. So, creativity loves constraints, and often the most creative and like super innovative solutions aren't actually that off the wall. It's just that no one ever put the two easy things together before.
And I want to go back to something you said earlier, Brock, about dealing with growing pains, especially for a young company, and even during the pandemic, where so many different things, even the way that we do business has shifted dramatically. What opportunities have you seen because of those growing pains and or the pandemic, and maybe some things that are challenges that you're trying to overcome?
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in first. Sorry to dominate the conversation here. So, it's really just you don't know what tomorrow's going to hold. Like, if you rewind to March or April of 2020, we had very well respected folks, venture capitalists, potential investors, telling us, hey, you should fire everybody, batten down the hatches. There's not going to be a consumer in 2 months. And you had those types of reactionary thoughts, and then you have the other ones, which are like, hey, people are going to be at home, people are going to need stuff. How can we as a company make sure that we are stable and open and can continue to provide this experience? And it takes a ton of commitment. Pretty much everyone on this panel has already talked about the core pillars or beliefs of their company. One of ours is it's called playing for the dream team, right? And so this idea that everyone's on the same team and we've collected the most capable folks around, so let's all band together and do what we need to do to get it done. And so, opportunities are, people are shopping more online, and now we have to make sure we can keep up with the volumes. We have to make sure that we continue to provide for, there's people who get their entire lifestyle, all of their income off of selling on StockX. And so we have to make sure we continue to service those people. And so it's about stability, in my opinion, just being stable, continuing to provide the service or the good that you promised you were going to provide. And it takes a lot of sacrifices and hard work.
Steve, I know, in reading a lot of things, the golf industry, which primarily, is your connection with Black Clover, it's been exploding during the pandemic. What opportunities have you seen and try to gauge from that with your brand, to continue to keep it relevant when other sports organizations are suffering?
Yeah. So during this pandemic, I think whenever you're running a business, you walk in every day feeling like you're solving a new puzzle you didn't expect to solve that morning. And I think the pandemic has just made that 10 times more. So just like everybody else in March and April, we're like, oh no, what does this mean? Like the world's shutting down. We're primarily a wholesaler. At that time, only 10% of our sales were online. And so this is going to look a lot different. So after April plays out and things start coming back and we see this strange trend online, suddenly our online sales start exploding and we see that really taking off. And then, oh, wait, people can play golf. That's an approved COVID activity. Okay, didn't expect that. But now that they can play golf, they can't go in the pro shop. So how do we encounter that? And so with each one of these, I feel like it actually created a new opportunity. Whenever you see these large disruptions in, macro trends or whatever you want to say, it creates opportunity. I think this spring we have gotten more phone calls to fill the voids for other brands like ours than we have any other year. There's still problems at the ports. They still can't deliver from overseas. And so us as a brand, we've just really focused on capitalizing all these. We don't ask why. We don't say, hey, why is golf approved, but something else isn't? But we just try to take advantage of each one of those. So for me, right now, one of our biggest problems is the ports. They can't get product in fast enough. So that's the puzzle I have to solve today. Next week, it might be something else. So when you specifically look at the golf industry, right now, golf is hot and it's going really well. But what happens when the economy, goes full speed again? Does that slow down? So what's the next thing we do? So for us, you just have to take it as it comes. And every day, every week is going to be different. And we just try to embrace that. But for us, probably the biggest thing we've seen during the pandemic is obviously this shift to online. We don't think that's going away. We just feel like it's accelerated it by 10 years. And so, like I said, we've gone from 10 to 30% of our sales are now online, which is something we never anticipated within 8 months.
Which is fantastic. I mean, to see growth, even not just in the industry, but there are a lot of other businesses that are suffering during the pandemic. It's great to hear that things are continuing to go well and that you're being able to capitalize on those opportunities. Yeah. Mackenzie, a different question for you is, BYU and a lot of other schools, were very entrepreneurial minded. What would be one piece of advice that you'd give to students or other attendees that are listening to this, that are looking to maybe start their own apparel brand, that you would have wished you would have known before starting out?
Yeah, this is the piece of advice that if you're talking to my husband or myself, you're always going to get. Is I think especially in Utah, we're so blessed. There's so many amazing companies. There's incredible tech companies. You've got people like Qualtrics who just had their IPO, who sold to SAP for billions of dollars. Like, you're surrounded by these huge success stories. And then you've got incredible lifestyle brands like Skull Candy. You've got brands like Freshly Pissed, these brands that have done really well. And I often think that it can get intimidating because you see all these brands and hear about their success and it's like, well, how do I get there? How do I get to that point? How do I build that? And I think the biggest piece of advice I can give to anyone is just keep it simple. We always say, just get on first base and then get to second base and then get third and then run home. Like, a point is a point, and every hit doesn't have to be a home run. And you can still get a point up on the board just from making your way around the bases. I think a lot of people will swing for the fences, try to have this home run idea. They don't validate it. They don't get enough information about who their audience is, who their customer is, what their customer actually wants, or what the market actually needs. And they go for it and then it fails and they get frustrated. And so just take it step by step and give yourself the ability and the freedom to fail. I think that understanding that failure is just a learning experience. And I know panelists have already talked about that, but fail quickly and learn how to pivot and navigate that failure into a success. And when you do that, you're going to be able to grow and learn and turn whatever failure was into a beautiful learning experience.
Now, Jessica, I'm going to ask you a similar question. I mean, some of us may not even want to start our own brand, but just work for a prolific brand. What advice would you give those students or attendees that are looking to break into this side of the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think trying to find some early opportunity, I mean, internships, ideally. I mean, even if your aspiration is to work in the bike industry, then go get a job in a bike shop over the summer. I think there's ways to get experience and exposure that you can put on a resume even before you've touched into the industry. I think there's a lot of nonprofits that need help. You've got a lot of young social media savvy people probably, for example, like raise your hand, volunteer for an organization that's aligned or near neighbor to the industry you want to be in. Even if it's unpaid, if you're willing, just getting a few experiences to show that you've got more than just a degree, I think it is critical. And then specifically in the outdoor industry, there's a wealth of organizations and job boards that are very specific to the industry. So one of them is called Malachi, and it's nothing but outdoor and sports industry jobs. There's a publication called Sporting Goods News that has a whole job board called SnoozeNet. And then outdoor industry jobs. So there's 3 dedicated websites that I know of, and they post a lot of entry-level roles. And then there's a specific organization called Camber Outdoors that is focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the outdoor space, and they have a wonderful job board. So I would scour those job boards and try and get some type of experience on your resume, paid, unpaid, whatever you can do to get some near neighbor experience on there before you go out and start applying for jobs.
Carson, can I add something there to that too? As from like a company standpoint, I love everything you said, Jessica, because I really think that in today's day and age, it's about putting yourself out there and taking the initiative. And if you're wanting to work with a certain company, I just read a LinkedIn post from someone who had this dream company. He wanted to work for him so bad. He went in, asked for a job, and they said, we're not hiring right now. And he said, I will work for free for you. Like, let me work for 3 weeks. Like, let me just prove myself. And the guy was like, sweet, like, come help in the warehouse for free for 3 weeks. And that's great. And didn't think anything would come of it. But after that 3-week period, the CEO or whoever it was like, you're on. Like, you're such a hard worker and you're talented and we want you. So don't be afraid to reach out. Network. Like, I hate that word because it kind of seems cliche. Like, I'm just going to go to this networking meeting. But this is like events like this, DM me, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm sure Jessica, Steven, and Brock all would say the same thing. Like, everyone wants to, I at least, maybe I'll speak for myself, but I think a lot of people are more willing to help and connect you than you might think. I think people get scared of reaching out and just asking. But the worst that's going to come from it is they say, no, we don't have any openings. And then you just move on to the next thing. So just don't be scared. Just go for it.
Yeah. I mean, I would add some of the same things. You have to be involved, right? Like, I guarantee you 1,000 people have hit up Ryan Smith to get jobs at the Jazz. And if I were him, I'd say, when was the last time you went to a Jazz game? Now maybe COVID is a little bit of an interesting time period, but I think you can still go to Jazz games. Like, I interview people all the time who are so impressed with StockX, love StockX. And I say, what's the last thing you bought? They never bought anything. It's like, don't show up and talk about how much you love this thing or you're dying to be involved in this industry, but you're not actually in it, right? Because there's ways, even if you're not working in it, there are ways to participate. And so you have to be able to show that you want it because, there are people who are qualified who are in it. And if you're not in it, it's going to be a point against you.
And don't wear Adidas to a Nike interview.
That's right. I hope no one here has bought anything on GOAT. I'm watching you guys.
Yeah, that's definitely very key information on that. We have a question here from the audience that I think is really good. And Steve, we'll start with you with this question. There are a lot of times, especially in the fashion and lifestyle branding industry, where you have really high highs because something is really popular, and you may face really low lows when it falls out of style. How do you continue to provide value to customers and continue to help them to buy into your lifestyle brand? Yeah,
I think it comes back to something I said earlier when we talked about the creativity section. one thing I didn't know about branding and fashion as much as I did when we first started is, even though it's fun to be creative and design these wild hats and do these things, it's about the numbers. And what I mean by that is you truly have to listen to what your customer wants. We design a new catalog every season that, if you count apparel and headwear, it has anywhere between 400 to 500 new styles in it. We all vote and think what we think is going to be a hit, what's not going to be a hit. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're totally wrong. And that's part of inventory management and guessing. But then we have to start seeing what sells. And we're always surprised every year what is the best seller. One of our top 3 hats we almost cut out because we were sitting on so much inventory after 12 months. We said, this is a dud. We absolutely blew it. Let's get rid of it. And then all of a sudden it picked up some momentum and it kept going and going. And so I think the most critical thing you can do to avoid those highs and lows is to actually see what the customer is buying. People can say they like stuff, but until they're willing to put money forward and actually participate in it, then they're going to really tell you what they like. So our number one selling hat has been the number one selling hat for the entire life of the company, and it hasn't changed. And that's been a while now. And so we're going to keep making that. And so I think people, when they're out there starting a business, you have to still listen to the numbers, as fun as it is to be creative and things. If a customer's buying something, keep giving it to them. If they don't like it and you think it's awesome, it goes back to that, well, you can wear it then because no one else is, and you have to be okay with it. And so I think that's how we've done a good job of navigating that, is actually seeing what the customer is purchasing and what they want, and be happy with it, whether, we thought it was going to be a hit or not. So,
Jessica, I'd like to pose the same question to you. How do you continue to provide that value to customers to keep buying into the brand?
Yeah, it's a more difficult challenge when you have a product that should last you for a couple of years. It's not fashion, right? And but Skullcandy as a brand as I mentioned, we take inspiration from sneaker culture and streetwear, and so we have this interesting balance where our number one SKUs are black, and the data is black headphones, black earbuds. We're going to make those all day long, every day. But as I said, we're a colorful brand, both literally and figuratively, and we need to give that to our consumers as well. So we do a lot of test and learn and experimentation. And the digital business that everybody's been talking about, we also benefited from some nice tailwinds from the pandemic, because everybody was using our product when they're locked down at home for school or work. And with digital, you have a lot more freedom to experiment that you don't have. We sell mostly to wholesale, so we sell to Best Buy and Target and people like that. And with supply chain and lead times, it's hard to experiment in that environment. And they want safe choices. So we give them the safe choices, and then we use our digital and social media to experiment, test and learn, and get a little wild and crazy. And so for the last 23 months, we've done these limited edition drops that are different colors or partnerships with other brands. And we keep the volume very limited, so we're not stuck with inventory, and it's infused some great excitement. So if you have your everyday black headphones, we're giving you another reason to come back and maybe pick up a second product that you maybe didn't need. Apparel, you're lucky people, get to wear different hats and different shirts, and there's you have use for multiples. So we had to think of ways to convince people to buy more of our stuff when they didn't really need it. And so we did that through these limited edition style programs. And then beyond the physical product itself, content for us has been incredibly important. So we committed 2 years ago to always on content, which means we've created content 365 days a year times 2 years now, which is an incredible feat with an internal creative team. And so part of that is just keeping people engaged and interested in our content. So even if they're not ready to start buying for us, or they're not ready for that next set of headphones, we're keeping them engaged with this branded content so that when it is time for them to come back, they've stayed along for the ride, and we're not just trying to jam headphones down their throat with our content all the time. So if you go and look at our social media feed for the last 2 years, it's all this like beautiful music and sport content that in some cases you can't even tell that we make headphones. It's more entertainment than anything else.
And it is so beautiful from another consumer goods brand. Like, I admire your social media. I was just scrolling through it, and anytime anyone asks us about Thread Wallets and why we started, my husband will nod to Skull Candy and say, we saw these brands like Stamp Socks, Ness Headwear, Skull Candy, who took a boring product and brought lifestyle to it and fun and color. And that's what we're trying to do with wallets. And everyone should go spend some time on Skull Candy's Instagram, because it's beautiful. And I was mind blown. Like, it was probably 2 years ago when you guys deleted like everything and started from scratch. I was like, whoa, that is such a bold move. But it's those bold moves that grab people's attention and your consumers' attention and keeps them engaged. And you can see it on your social posts. Like, such a nod to you. It's so, so beautiful.
Thank you, Mackenzie. That was a very scary day when we deleted all of that.
I'm sure I would have had an anxiety attack, but you guys pulled it off and it's beautiful.
Brock, I'll ask you the same question. We're running out of time, but just share your insights on how StockX and how what you do with StockX, how you continue to provide value for these customers.
Yeah, I mean, we're a little bit of a unique position relative to everyone else on the panel, given that we're the marketplace, right? We don't necessarily determine what people want, right? They determine it themselves. We aggregate a variety of brands. So, again, we call ourselves the leading e-commerce for consumers of current culture. So the coolest sneakers, that brand today is Nike, right? But tomorrow it could be someone else. And just like the Skull Candy model on some of these cool limited release headphones, what that does is it builds this great brand halo, but it leaves a lot of people wanting, right? They want it. They want that item they couldn't get. If they could get it, they might not want it so much. But when they can't have it, they really want it. And then they go to these aftermarket places like us at StockX and they buy it. So for us, it's really just about having trust. The trust that StockX is going to deliver the item to you. StockX is going to authenticate it, verify that it's exactly what you purchased, and that your experience when you shop on StockX feels like when you're getting that item directly from Nike.com or Adidas or Yeezy Supply or Supreme, wherever you could have gotten these firsthand, it feels that same way. And so we're dealing with a lot of high value items, very exciting merchandise. And of course, there's very enterprising people who don't like to obey the law. And so they're out there counterfeiting items and trying to get them through and pass us through. And so we're every single day, trying to stay ahead of those folks and figuring out ways to tell things that are real from fake and adding that to our proprietary database and keeping ahead of it. So for us, it's just about winning the trust battle and being, like I said earlier, open and stable, so that when the people speak, I want this, I'm willing to pay this price for it, that we can facilitate the transaction.
I think that leaves us on a great note here about trust. And for those listening to this, these are all four of these panels are people to trust and are experts in their field. And just want to say thank you to each of you for participating in this. We've been inspired and taught a lot today. And for those watching, we have our case competition coming up at 5 p.m. tonight with our final teams. Hope you'll tune into that and listen to some of our students' findings with an expansion franchise in the NBA. But thank you again, panelists, for joining us, and we'll look forward to the rest of you joining us for another session.